underway with our work and briefing session. Today is the 2nd of February, believe it or not. Can't believe we're in February. So we have a pretty good schedule tonight. Should be able to work through our entire meeting on time, hopefully. We do have an executive session we'll go into as well. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and get into the working session. Just let folks know I'll read the things about the governor's order in terms of online communication and so forth when we get to the meeting itself, and also with the citizen comments. For right now, we'll go ahead and get underway with our working session. And so the first thing that we have is Mr. Fredrickson. If you go ahead and go through the consent items, please.
Yes, Mayor, members of council, on your consent agenda, you have the considering the minutes for the joint meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission and also the City Council meeting of January 19th. Your second item is consider a resolution appointing the election judges for the City of Duncanville, Dallas County for the May 1st general election, and authorizing the City Secretary to approve on behalf of the City of Duncanville any changes in the list of recommended election judges, which is attached in Exhibit A on that item. And then finally, item 4C is a resolution authorizing the application to the North Central Texas Council of Governments applying for the FY21 Homeland Security Grant for a thermal imaging device in support of the police special units, special operations unit. Those were your three consent items.
Quick question on that one for you, Mr. Fredrickson, or for Chief. Did I read correctly that this is not a matching grant? This is a straight up grant that's going to be able to procure that device without us matching any funds?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Yep.
Very good. Okay. Now, do we only need one of these, or do we need more than one?
No, sir, I think one will be sufficient.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? And, you know, I'm going to just put it on the table. Does anyone wish to move anything of individual consideration to consent? Seeing nothing, we will go ahead and move on as we go. Okay. Okay. Moving on to item number 2, briefings and presentations. IT Director Tracey Beekman. A presentation discussing status of the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Program Plan, AMI. This is Mr. Summerlin and Mr. Beekman. So we are up. We see your screen. Go ahead and proceed. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, thank you. It's Tracey Beekman, IT Director. We are bringing this back to you. As you remember, we've brought this to you a couple of times before. One, to give you a recommendation for moving to the Munis UBCIS module for our ERP system. And then again, we did see a preliminary utility audit. And then at that point, we did move forward with the investment grade audit. So as a reminder, that investment grade audit was completed by Performance Services, and it defined existing conditions we have throughout the city. It established our utility baselines. It presented it'll present some project economics, and it'll give us final project pricing for the overall AMI solution. So the reason why we're looking to do this is because a smart meter implementation actually puts power in the hands of our citizens. It gives them near real-time data. It allows them to be better consumers of water resources. It'll allow them to create a conservation plan and track their success. It'll give us more accurate water usage measurements. And with our current technology, as outdated as it is, we typically don't know about water leaks at the our residents until about 30 days or more. So we did look at about 4 different meters. As you can see, Badger meter, Master meter, Camstruck, Metron Farnay. That is the team that did take a look at it. Mark Stringer actually took a pretty good lead on this, and he did call and speak with several municipalities that use the different meter types. He did a great job, got lots of great feedback that we used in consideration for moving forward. So, and at that point, I am actually going to turn it over to Performance Services. It's Ira Nicodermus. He's going to talk a little bit about the criteria we used and what got us to where we're at now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Beekman, and thank you, Mayor and members of council. Before I get into this, I just want to say that the staff has been phenomenal to work with, very supportive. Tracey already gave a shout out to Mark Stringer, but with this slide here on some of the information that we captured, especially on the references, Mark did a phenomenal job with that. So really excited to present the rest of this here with you and show you what we have today. So looking at the two manufacturers that were shortlisted from the 4 that you saw, based on just the preliminary conversations, we did have each of those companies in for preliminary discussions. Really, Badger and Master Meter were the clear finalists. So what you're seeing here is a side-by-side comparison as well as who was the strongest in these areas. So we'll be talking more about these respective categories as we go through the rest. So I'll just kind of briefly cover these. Network infrastructure, this is the communication system of how we're going to talk to the meters from the central location so you can get that back into the billing system and use all that data. Badger uses cellular systems, so they use like an AT&T network. And Master Meter, you have antennas on the water towers, different repeaters. You'll see more of that design later. So we really did say, you know, the cellular system is good in a lot of ways. You don't have anything to install or maintain. So we kind of gave that one to Badger in that area. References, we really focused on comparable references in North Texas. And Badger, overall it was good, but they did have some concerns around the design of the meters. You'll see kind of the next slide what that was. They did say, to their credit, that any of those issues that they heard of had been resolved. So they did get good support. When we looked at Master Meter, they had about 5 similar sized North Texas references, and really all the feedback was positive. So that was really good to hear. The next couple here were what we looked at around the actual construction. Badger uses a stainless meter. It's very compact, a little bit more bulky with Master Meter. You'll see a picture of these. So we gave this one to Badger. But the big thing that we found was on the transmitter. This is the antenna that will connect to communicate. It's a 2-piece system with Badger. So you have to drill it through the lid and there's a wire that connects them, where with Master, everything's integrated. You don't have a separate wire and antenna. This kind of goes into the next one for the lid requirements. Right now, throughout the city, there's only about 100 plastic lids. And with the Badger system, because it needs to mount an antenna through the lid, basically everything would need to be updated to plastic lids, all the existing metal and concrete lids. So that was a significant downside where Master Meter will work with the existing system. All this translates into cost. We'll show you these numbers here in a minute. Badger ended up being a bit more upfront, as well as the ongoing annual cost, where Master Meter, of course, is lower on both of those. So if we go to the next slide, this is just to give you some graphics of what we're talking about around the construction. The left-hand side is the Badger system. This is one of their 2-inch meter. You have almost 400 of these throughout the city. And you can see that it's pretty compact. It's kind of looks like a pipe and then it's mounted, but that wire that's connected is the concern that we heard from some other references. The lower left-hand corner is showing you the transmitter. This is what's mounted through the lid. And you can see what that assembly looks like with that lid. This would be an upside down view. The top is very flush. So it would sit flush to the lid, but you do have kind of a lot going on inside the meter box. Master Meter, these are 2 different meters that they have. The top one is more of your typical residential meter. The lower one is some that's more for the larger commercial meters. You actually have some of these throughout the city already. You've used Master Meter in other locations. So some of those the staff is very familiar with. If we move to the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about that network infrastructure, and it's through what we call the propagation study. So part of the due diligence that was done was modeling out to ensure that there was going to be coverage so that all of these meters that are going to get installed can communicate. We don't have issues of lost signal or pockets that don't work well. So what Badger does is they looked at all the addresses. There's over 13,000 accounts. So they go address by address and check that to make sure that there's cellular coverage. Now, generally there's good cellular coverage throughout the city. There were a few areas that are probably a little bit weaker. As you know, you have some pretty varied terrain there in parts of Duncanville. So some of those areas might be a little bit weaker. We didn't think it would be a major issue, but the thing is, since it is using the cellular system, if there is a problem, there's not a lot you can do about it. They just, it kind of is what it is. If we go to the next one, which is master meter, this is a prettier chart because it's a little bit different how we do this one. If you focus on those kind of three red areas that spread out, those are the three water towers where the three antennas would be mounted. So we kind of start there. But then what we did was the team from Master Meter came out, walked with us, walked with the staff, and we went and looked at any areas that we thought might be trouble spots. So went and looked at some of the areas with more of that terrain or any issues. And that's how we said, let's make sure that we're budgeting in to do repeaters there. So if you look at those pink circles, those represent 5 different repeaters that will be strategically located so that if we have an area that might have been a little bit weak from the antennas, we're basically boosting that with a repeater so we have coverage. So we're very confident that this will not only work well, but it will work with the existing meter or the existing lids, which was a big cost savings. And if we get into the project and there was an area that was weak, we can always add another repeater. So it's a very flexible solution, and I think it's going to work very well for coverage throughout the city. Any questions? I see a question. Mr. Harvey?
Yes, Mr. Harvey.
How will the meters be read? Currently, the meters are read by meter readers going from location to location, physically looking at the meter. So how will that change under the new solution?
Yeah, it's a great question. So probably one of the biggest advantages, aside from the real-time data and the increase in accuracy, is that now the meters will be read in several times a day, and it's read remotely. So the purpose of this infrastructure is that the meters are connected. They've got a battery inside them that communicates back to these towers, and it's able to pull on that data on a near real-time basis. So there won't be a need for meter readers to go around and do that reading. Now, those folks will be used in other ways. I'll defer to the staff to kind of talk about that plan because I think it's a good one. But as far as the actual reading, Mr. Harvey, this will all be done remotely through the infrastructure and connected directly to the meters.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions before we move on to the scope? Yes, ma'am.
You said for areas that you have weak antennas or weaker antennas. And so how will you know that? And how do you rectify that? I mean, you said you would add more
Repeaters. Yep.
Yeah, repeaters, but
Yes,
sounds
ma'am.
like we're trading some issues just to get new ones.
Yeah, I think if I understand your question, so the way that this propagation study, the way that they model it is they have a software program that looks at the actual topography. So they're considering, those elevation changes in the model. And then they say, here's where we're going to put the location. And all of these colors that we're seeing represent the coverage strength that you'll have. So the question's a good one of how do we know? The first thing that's done is based on this model. Now, what we think we're going to have coverage is with 5 repeaters, but you'll see later on, we've actually allowed for in the budget for up to 10. So when we get out and start doing the installation, if we have these 5 and find that there's still a couple areas that have problems, we have already factored in that we can go add those additional ones. The repeaters aren't very difficult or expensive to install. You can mount them on top of a building, on top of a light pole. So they're much easier to just put exactly where you need them. But I think in summary, it's done off of a model, but then when we actually do the installation, if there's a problem in a specific area, we'll make sure we go back and address that.
You're saying that you would know from the onset. It's not something that would go bad.
Correct.
Okay, so it wouldn't be left up to the homeowner or the person receiving.
No, ma'am.
Okay, the city would know.
Ira, let me address that just real quickly. This is Richard. When the plan is, when we get to the part of actually installing these meters and this infrastructure, is that they will be tested in groups as we put them in. And so anything that's not getting a read before we move away from manual reading, that will be addressed.
Thanks, Richard. Mr. Harvey?
I have a follow-up question, something Richard just brought up. So what entity will be responsible for installing the meters? Will it be the company or will it be the city?
Well, Mr. Harvey, again, I'll take that question. This is part of why we've engaged PSI to do this study and to make these recommendations. And so pending council direction, you will direct us where we go from here. And if it's to move forward with this company, then PSI would be the ones that would be responsible for all this installation, partnered with the city. But that's up to the council to give us that direction.
So PSI will serve as a project manager of sorts?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cooks, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. Based upon what we're hearing on PSI study, was this rolled out? Was there any cities that you rolled it out in different areas first, or did you roll it out in a complete city all at one time? So tell us how the study went up when we talk about the rollout.
So I want to make sure I understand the question. So you say the study for y'all specifically, or are you saying for other references, other projects that we've done? How do we do the installation? I want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
The other projects that you've done, share with us whether was it a phased approach or did you roll out the entire city all at one time? What has been the history of how you rolled it out in the past?
Got it, understood. And what I might do is pull in, we have Mark Inbody on the call as well. He's our senior project manager. Mark, would you like to talk about some of the other projects you've done and how you phase those in?
Yeah, I just had to find myself to where I could unmute. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes,
We
sir.
have you.
All right, basically what we do is it's a citywide implementation is we do essentially all the meters, the active meters in the city at one given time. That way you've got a comprehensive retrofit and it's the most expeditious and the most economical way to do it is to do it all at once as opposed to doing it in multiple phases. The problem with multiple phases is you run into additional costs with mobilization, demobilization, and then you've got some people that have the new technology, some that don't. So if you do it all at once, and every project I've ever done, and I've done several of these, it's always been a single phased approach.
Okay, so it's been single phase throughout all the projects you've completed.
Correct. Did that adequately answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Mr. Harvey?
In terms of meters that will be replaced, because I'm sure there will be some that will need to be replaced, what happens to those meters? I would think that normally that when the city replaces meters, they are sold off as surplus. So how will this be handled? Will it be handled any differently? Please explain.
Do you want me to answer this one, Ira?
Yeah, Mark, you can take that one. That's actually a good question.
Okay, no, thank you for the question. Basically what we do is, every one of these meters we take out of the ground, we look at as it being city property. The vast majority of the cities that I've dealt with in the past, they actually will hire, or salvage them for scrap because, you've got brass and things like that that actually have some value to it. So, different cities handle it different ways, but, as far as we're concerned, those are your meters. We will deliver them to the location that you specify for us. And at that point, you can dispose of them, appropriately. If you can resell them into someplace, that's great. If not, get the salvage value from them.
Thank you.
And Mr. Nick Debus, how many more slides have you got?
We have a few more to go, so let's.
I'm wondering if we can get all the way through. So maybe a lot of questions we have right now will be answered as you finish through. So.
Absolutely, and these have been good questions. I think, let's keep going through and we'll pause for additional ones. So this is more on the scope. This basically you can see the breakdown. We found that there's 13,176 meters. Of course, the majority of those are the smaller residential meters. If you remember back in August, we had just under 13,000 before. As we were going through the due diligence, we found some additional ones in the record. So we feel confident that we have all of the meters captured in this 13,176. Now, in addition to this, within the budget, we also put in for some replacement lids. This is primarily going to be lids that are damaged. We know that we have some that will need to be done, so we've allocated for 3,000. But also, if we have an area that has some coverage issues, then this is another good way that we can go in and replace it with a plastic lid that will give it better signal strength. So that 3,000 will give us some flexibility in a couple ways. 1,000 replacement boxes, so the meter boxes that are actually set in the ground. We know that some of those have issues as well, so there's 1,000 of those. 26 spare meters just to have some stock. And the last piece I'll say is that I mentioned earlier, there are a couple, maybe about a half dozen of these new larger master meters in place. We will reuse those. So anything that is good that we know we can keep, it's accurate, that was already built in. So we're not trying to replace things that don't need to be replaced. So here's the numbers on cost. Badger came in at just under 7.9 million. Normally they are a little bit lower cost, but the issue here, like we said, was that all of the plastic or all of the lids would need to be replaced with plastic. And that does start to add up. So that put them a little bit over master meter. On the right-hand side, you see that they come in around 7.6 million. That includes those allowances that we talked about. And then we talked earlier about the repeaters. We budgeted for up to 10, just in case we have any additional beyond the 5 that the software has shown that we need. The bigger thing though, from the initial cost, the project cost, is the ongoing cost. So back to the Badger on the left-hand side, $118,000 per year. And the reason that this is quite a bit higher is because they're having to pay for that, or you're having to pay for the ongoing data cost for cellular data. So all that information is being sent back and forth, and that adds up quite a bit. So it's an ongoing cost of $118,000. The flip side is the ongoing cost for master meters, just under 25,000. You own that infrastructure, you put it up, and it's much lower cost because you don't have that ongoing contract with AT&T to provide that data service. So the real big difference here when you're thinking about a 20-year period is more on the annual cost than it is even on the upfront cost. So let's kind of take a break from cost and scope for a minute, and let's talk about the savings. So a big part of this due diligence was quantifying how much loss do you currently have in the system due to meter inaccuracy. So we went through and did a statistical sampling of the meters. We tested about 100 meters and had a third-party company, an independent company, Southern Flow Meter. They came out, spent about a week and a half on site. They pulled meters, they tested them, and they said, here's how accurate those meters are currently. You'll see that on this kind of third column, measured meter accuracy. And you'll see that, apologies for any background noise, the 5/8 meters, the residential meters, really aren't too bad. They're coming in on average about 97.6%. Where you're having more issues is in that kind of mid-range of those 1.5, 2, and 3-inch meters. The 4-inch meters, there's not that many. These are some of the ones that were newer that were replaced recently. So those were also pretty good. When we model it out, we modeled the new meters at 98.5% accurate. In reality, they're essentially going to be 100% accurate, but again, we want to be conservative. So we looked at the delta up to 98.5. When we go all the way to the right-hand column, what we're now doing is taking what that accuracy means for increased water that's being captured. We're looking at that with your rates, and that translates into the dollars. So you can see that by meter size in the lower right-hand corner, the 623,000, that's the number to remember. $623,000 that's currently being lost will be added back into your budget because you're going to capture it with the new meters that are accurate. If we go to this slide and the following slide, this is just a graphical view of what we just looked at. You can see that the 5/8 meters, they represent about half of the water that's being used in the city. So that's going to go up a bit, and then you can see the rest of them. You tend to be more commercial meters when you get into these 1.5 or 2 inch and above meters. So you can see that it's kind of split, maybe a little bit 60-40 kind of between your residential and commercial. If we go to the next one, this chart looks very similar, but this is based on water and sewer revenue. So right now, the water and sewer revenue is about 18.2 million per year. We're saying that that's going to increase by 623,000. So it comes up to about 18.8. And now you can see kind of where that comes from. Again, with a lot of it, about 10 million is currently coming from these smaller 5/8 meters. The residential won't see a big increase because generally those meters are pretty accurate, where some of the other ones that are less accurate, like those 2 inch meters, you'll see a bit more of an increase because currently they're only testing in the mid 80% accuracy. Right. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Richard, and he's going to cover the next few slides on the financial situation.
So I wanted to bring the council up to date. Our FY20 actuals are not quite yet audited. So keep in mind that these are unaudited numbers, but we're getting very close to finishing the audit. I don't expect there to be any material change in these numbers. So we ended FY19, of course, with a ending fund balance of about 9.4 million. And so our fund balance over our reserve was about 6.4 million. And of course, we did not raise rates. So our FY20 actuals, we were drawing down on fund balance. And we ended, or what I anticipate that that when the audit is finished is that we're going to be at an ending fund balance of about 8.4 million, which is about 5.3 million above that operating reserve. What I want to demonstrate too is if we look at our FY21 budgeted numbers for revenues and expenditures, because we didn't do any kind of rate increase for FY21, we're going to continue to draw down on that fund balance. So I anticipate that we're going to end without doing anything with the project to increase revenues or to incur additional cost, at ending at about 7.1 million, which is only about 3.9 million above that 60-day reserve. And that trend continues for FY22 because again, we don't have anything budgeted in for any type of rate increase. And so I wanted to hone in on the FY21, the 3.9 million fund balance over reserve. I feel like that as we talk about financing, that we're probably at about a maximum of being able to pay down about 3.5 million. Go to the next slide, please. So we got with Hilltop, our bond counsel, and got estimates for funding the entire project. I rounded up, instead of the 7.6, I rounded up to 7.7 million in terms of the full funding amount, and then paying 2 million down from fund balance reserve. I got the estimates for 5.7 million to be financed, and then if we used the whole 3.5 million and paid down to 4.2 million, these would be the debt service, annual debt service. I feel like that based on other projects that have been financed through Hilltop and based on the expected life of these meters, I think that that a 15-year bond is the most appropriate alignment with the project. So I would suggest that we hone in and look at the 15-year bond. So you can see that the debt service is $610,964. And if you remember the revenue projections that PSI has put together, that just about covers that debt service. And then with the 2 million down, 453,463. And then with the 3.5 million down, an annual debt service of 336. Next slide, please. So I wanted to pop those numbers into our budgeted numbers so that we get a feel for how that's going to affect our fund balance. And so essentially what I did is modeled out for fiscal year 22, 23, and 24. And so if we use the entire $3.5 million to pay down, assuming that we're going to do the construction in FY22, you see that change in fund balance of a negative $5 million. That's our normal operating cost plus the $3.5 million. And then we would have an annual debt service starting in fiscal year 22 of $336,266. And then during the year of construction, based on the model, we would only have about $93,000 in revenue that first year. And then we would pop up with at about $715,000. That's the savings in water revenue of the $600,000 plus about another $90,000 in O&M cost reduction. And so when we look at it like that, we can see that because we don't have any rate increase in FY21, we would, without a pretty substantial rate increase in FY22, we would end the year with about 1.8 million, which would be 1.4 million below our fund balance reserve. And then of course that would increase to 2.9 million under reserve in 23 and 24. Again, I've not programmed any kind of rate increase into these. So just wanted to show you the numbers. So go to the next slide, please. If we put 2 million down out of our fund balance, you can see how the numbers work there. So it's the same exact exercise. You would end fiscal year 22 with only about 93,000 below the targeted fund balance. And then 23 would be 1.6 million and 3.3 million out in FY24. Again, no rate increase is programmed into this. Next slide, please. This is the full financing slide. If we were to not use any of our fund balance to pay down to finance the entire 7.6 million, you can see that we could still squeeze out FY22 without a rate increase and be drawn down on that fund balance pretty substantial. And then FY23, we would be looking at almost making our operating reserve without any kind of rate increase. I would, suggest that if we choose this type of scenario, that we would probably want to look at doing some type of a small increase in FY23. And again, once we get into the project, by that point in time, we'll know how our revenues are responding and certainly have the costs behind us. That FY24 might be the first year that you have to look at a rate increase, but just again, wanted to model these things out so that you see how it's going to impact our fund balance with these different financing scenarios. Okay, next slide. I'll turn it back over to Ira to talk about this a little bit.
Thanks, Richard. And just this slide and one more from me. So we're getting close to the end here, but I remember, I think Mayor Gordon, you liked this slide when we showed you back in August. So this is now the cash flow with all these hard numbers. So if you look kind of run you through it real quick, left to right. The additional water revenue, the 623, you saw that number. Note that that stays constant throughout. So again, we're not assuming that we have an escalator in here for rates to keep this very conservative. Jump over to the O&M savings. Richard just mentioned this. We start with about 92,000. This is really based on not having to replace meters because all the new meters will be with a 20-year warranty. So that's driving that O&M savings. It goes up a bit over time, and then you'll notice in year 10, after year 10, it starts to go down. That's because the warranty is 10 years full, 10 years prorated. So we account for the fact that if a meter fails in, let's say, year 15, the manufacturer prorates that warranty. So we aren't assuming as much savings for O&M when we get to that point. So line 6 is the total of those. Debt service, this is a little bit different than the number you saw before because now I'm doing it off of the 7.669. The rate is 2.12%. This is what Richard gave me for the CO rate. Annual service costs, we saw that before, the 24,707. We did assume to be conservative an escalator in here. Again, this isn't paid to us. This is paid to Master Meter. They take care of all the infrastructure. So while you own those antennas, part of what they'll do is, if something goes wrong with it, that's their responsibility. So that annual service is all the licensing fees, everything associated with the software, the infrastructure, et cetera. Master Meter is actually based in Mansfield. So one of the things that's nice is the factory is very close, as well as they have, like I said, a lot of good references and distributors here in the area. The only piece down the road is line 10 that you would pay to us. This is the measurement and verification services. So part of what we deliver, in addition to a turnkey delivery of the project, is that we're guaranteeing the performance. So each year, and we have it modeled just through the debt service, we'll come back and say, hey, this is how we're actually performing. This is what the accuracy, the revenue, the water loss, how it's trending. So we can ensure that you're actually getting these numbers that we're showing you in this forecast. So you add those together to your total annual, and then the last one is just the difference between the cost and the total savings. So what you'll see here is that every year this project is putting money back into the budget. Throughout this 15-year period, you're around 90,000 that's coming back in. And then of course, once the debt service drops off, that jumps up quite a bit. So it's a very solid project as far as helping the situation and putting money back in. And the last slide that I'll cover is the next one. This is just a graphical view. And what we're doing now is we're showing in blue the cumulative of those savings. So, 88,000 some change that first year, and then the next year again. So it's a cumulative buildup over time. And when you get to the end of the 20-year model, it's 4.6 million. That's net of all of the costs that's being put back in to your budget. By contrast, if we look at the lower part, this is what happens if we don't do the project. And this is really a conservative estimate because we're not saying as part of this number that the water loss gets worse over time. Instead, what we're saying is you're going to still have to continue to replace meters. They're going to continue to fail eventually at a greater rate because as they get older, you'll have more issues. So the only piece that we factored in is this. We're not trying to show all this additional kind of apocalypse scenario of additional water loss. But by doing the project now, kind of the summary is that we can capture that 623,000 in revenue that's currently being lost. You have all these new meters, the meter reading becomes real time, and it puts money back into the budget. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to, I believe, Tracey, and he will close us out.
Well, I have a major question before we do that, Tracey. If you could go back to that, I'm going to call it the life cycle costing, the big spreadsheet, Mr. Nicodemus. There we go, right there, hit 19.
Yes, sir.
I have a $12.6 million question. And I know that back in August, I was concerned about life cycle costing, and this is what it does. I appreciate that. It takes it even beyond the 15 years that we've been looking at debt service. However, my question goes to the $623,000 saved each year. The way I'm looking at it, and I really need somebody to dissuade me from my thinking here, is that this $623,000, going back to what you said, Mr. Nicodemus, is what we would be capturing as lost revenues that we're losing today. So once all these meters are installed, we don't lose that anymore. So I really question how this $623,000 can be applied through the life of the project, because after the meters are installed, we don't lose it anymore. So to me, that $623,707 is applied maybe in year 1 and year 2, but after that, it vanishes, it evaporates, because the meters are no longer losing any, or no longer, we are capturing all of our data and we're billing for all of the information. We're not losing any more water. So somebody please dissuade me from thinking that from line 2 all the way down to line 20, that $623,000 needs to go away.
Mayor, it's based on the fact that if we did not replace those meters with these new, this new technology meter, if we continue replacing meters at the pace that we're going, we're struggling to keep up with 1/10 of the city per year, that water loss would continue ad infinitum.
I understand that, Richard, in terms of, but I look at this spreadsheet as the life cycle costing over the life of the project for 20 years. And I understand what you're saying, but by saying that this is not a spreadsheet that says what you just said, Mr. Summerlin, but this is a spreadsheet that says what we're going to happen when we do it. It's not if we don't do it, unless I'm misunderstanding the entire perspective on this whole spreadsheet. This spreadsheet says if we do it, this is what it looks like. We end up with 4.6 at the far right-hand corner. It's not a what if we don't. So this is where I'm deeply concerned about how this 623,000 has been incorporated.
I agree totally. It looks like Enron math.
I think, so if I can take a stab at it, because it's a valid question. I think that it really, when we're modeling the cash flow, we say, what's the baseline? And then if we were only looking at the first year, I think only things that would have a 1-year life could be applied. But the reason we're doing it over the 20 years is because it would otherwise, as Richard said, it would otherwise continue. So I think it's just like anything that we have, any financial instrument that we would have that would have an ongoing cash flow to it. We have to model it over that period in order to see the life. So while you're right, that year over year, we're not showing that it's an increase because you see it the one time, it does still show that it's almost like an annuity because it continues to give over time versus the baseline, which is before the project. Does that help explain it at all, or?
It does, but I still look at this spreadsheet as a what if we do, not as what if we don't. And what Richard just said is that first column is a what if we don't. And I don't know how to put money towards something that really isn't even exists. It's like that's phantom money in terms of the spreadsheet.
So I guess another way to look at it is if you think about your current water sewer revenues, so I said they're about 18.2 million. If you don't do the project, you could continue at that, let's take the rates and everything out for a minute. Just think about the volume you're capturing. You could continue at the 18.2 million, right? So that's kind of one way to look at it. And going back to the slides that Richard covered, that still has the question of, the rates and the drawdown and all that kind of is regardless of the project. But if we do the project, then now that 18.2 becomes closer to 18.8 because we're adding the 600,000, and then in addition we're lowering the O&M costs, right? So maybe that's a better, easier way to look at it is on the positive side, you could continue at the 18.2, or you could increase that to closer to 18.8 because you're capturing that 600,000.
I hear it, but it's just not convincing me that from year 3 on to 20 that $624,000 ought to be calculated into the metrics. it's more of a hypothesis than it is a factual demonstration of the cash flow, as long as that's included in that column. I mean, Richard, I hate to be contrary about this, but it's just not ringing true that number should be continuing on through the life of, through a 20-year life.
I agree. And I also wonder how we, in a year where people stayed home and didn't go to their offices and to work, that we didn't use a lot more water. It should, I don't know how, can we go back to that slide on 2020 on, and the water that was used?
Is that the one you're looking for right there?
Well, it had the years at the top. Well, I don't see it.
I think we were looking at the the one by meter size. So I think to that question, this is the differences aren't years. So we're not showing an increase of versus 1 year versus the other. This is based on the testing.
But we should, because it looks like, and I don't know, and no one else does either, how long we're going to be in a situation where there's not that much movement. And I would think that more water was being used instead of less, which means we bill more. And and also when you're looking at measured meter accuracy, it's not that far off.
So yeah, a couple things to the point. So when we looked at the baseline, I have to go back and see what we use for baseline year. I believe we used 2019, but we use a 12-month period.
Well, 2019 is not accurate.
Well, so when we think about the impact of the improved accuracy, you're right that the volume is going to go up and down. COVID was a strange situation, and that increased.
It's not was, sir. It's still here, and they don't know if and when it will ever change. I can tell you, someone I'm very close to works for Deloitte, and they've sold off their buildings because they found out, guess what? That they could work from home remotely, and they didn't need all this real estate. And so I imagine that there will be more companies and businesses that have found that, have realized that since this exercise that we've gone through in 2020 with people working remotely. I don't think it's going to go back to the way it was, even if we get the virus under control. I think that there are a lot of businesses that found out that they didn't need all these assets. And there'll be more people working remotely, which means they'll be at their home, which means they'll be using water. Now, if that happens, then maybe we'll have more water in our water budget and not have to put it on a bond. But I don't think we can go back to 2019 and use figures.
Yeah, understood. And I apologize if it came across that way. My point was simply to say that water volume does change over time. Probably the bigger factor we normally see is just rainfall, because that impacts how much people use irrigation. So the volume will change each year. It always has, and other things will change it over time. So to your point, if the water use continues to be larger, then what that means is that the accuracy of the meters becomes even more important, because you'd be losing more, because again, it's all a percentage of that whole that's currently being lost. And well, you're right that 85% accuracy doesn't look like a huge amount, but when we're looking at how expensive water has become, especially here in Texas, that can add up. That can add up quite a bit. We're looking at 18.2 million. So by improving that even just a few percent, that's how we see that increase of over 600,000. So they're not horrible. We've seen worse, but the numbers still show that it's a good return in the investment.
What I kind of like to sum up is, I don't think any of us on council say that this is a bad idea. We know that it needs to be done. And we know that there's savings. We know that it's going to benefit the city. It's going to benefit our citizens. Because we've even had discussions where you've educated us to understand that a citizen can watch their daily consumption and know if they've got a leak or if they've got a problem, which is something they cannot do today. So the benefits and advantages of doing AMI, I mean, it's there. It's concrete, no question whatsoever. My particular question is just the use of the numbers and coming out in terms of coming out with that net cash flow, whether it's going to be that high or if it's going to be a little lower. I guess I'll just, I will learn to understand that and also accept it in terms of our future cash flow, because we got to do this. We know that, and so I don't want, it's what I want to portray to you folks at PSI and to Richard and Tracey and the rest of our council staff is that we've been talking about this for a good number of years. We know it's an absolute necessary thing that we do for our city. The question I've just got is this, the $623,000, how it's cranked into an overall measurement over a 20-year life. And I guess I'll learn to live with that, because Richard is a much more astute and adept accountant than I'll ever be. So I just, I want council to understand that I'm not disagreeing with doing this project, not at all. I'm 100% in favor of it. It's how we measure its financial success over the life of even, the debt service that we have to do, and using what Richard has recommended to us.
Mayor, is now the time to spend $7.6 million or $7 million?
Well, it's a question of how much down we put toward that debt service as well, and that's what Richard gave us in that particular summation. In terms of the 15-year is the most advantageous debt service, using, what was the number to put down on that, Richard? I don't recall that.
$2 million.
I gave you 3 different scenarios. One, putting $3.5 million down on it, a scenario putting $2 million down on it, and then a scenario where we didn't use any fund balance. We financed the entire
amount. Yeah, I want to stop. Yeah, Mark, you've got your hand up, and I know I've gotten a little verbose on this, and I apologize for that, but just Mark, go ahead.
And I would agree with what you're saying. I don't want to go back and rehash all of this, but I do want to make sure I understand that the 623, am I hearing we saying that was lost revenue? That's lost revenue. Is that what I'm hearing him saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's lost revenue due to the inaccuracy estimates based on the test.
So we're paying. So right now, though, we're still paying that ourselves out of city funds. Is that correct? Because it's not really, it's lost, but we're still having to pay it, right?
We're not collecting.
Right. In other words, we're paying for the water that people use, but we're not collecting the revenue because we're not accurately measuring what people are using.
Okay, so here's what I want to say, and I thought that's what you were saying, because really, those laws, it's going to be, it's found now, but it's really going to now be sent to the citizens whose water bill now will be increased because it's been found.
Yes.
For it. So now the water bill will go up in some cases for some others. So I wanted to make sure I made that note. That 623, it's just been allocated to citizens versus us. So
well, wait a second. Wait a second. Let me interrupt real quick. Let me get in, Councilmember Jameson. We are buying that water from Dallas. So we're still paying for that water. The issue is it needs to be accounted for through the accuracy of the meters. And that's what we're trying to get at. And of course, Councilmember Jameson, these are always going to be estimates as we're looking at it. And let me just make the point is that we're coming back to you because when we started this audit, We wanted to come back and give you a bigger, or at least from a standpoint of a better picture of where we're sitting as far as the breadth of what this issue is going to be. Because in the past, as we've talked about the AMI project, we've gone from an estimate of 1.5 to 3.5 without really having an understanding of the total universe of what we're dealing with as far as our meters, the accuracy of those meters, and looking at our system. And no doubt that this is a large number to digest. And I think, Mayor, to your point of the questions, we need to be able to better explain that capture. But right now, the purpose was to kind of say, here's what we've done, here's what the performance audit is providing, for us to then come back and have more of these budget discussions with you as to what direction you want to go as a council for the totality of this project. So our purpose tonight was to bring this, to show here's what we're really looking at, and not guessing at how much in our meter infrastructure that we need to address. Now we know, and we can see it as a larger picture.
Hey, Paul, I'm not disagreeing. I just want to make sure we share, though, that the 623 will impact.
Understood.
Yeah, that's what I want to make sure it impact the other way.
But as we demonstrated, it's going to impact the businesses that have the larger meters, and there's a bigger proportion of those meters that in a larger disparity between the accuracy than there is on residential meters.
Okay, well, I just want just so we openly say that. I don't want to appear one-sided. It's two-sided to me, and I want to look at both sides. So,
but that
it is not
the whole reason for bringing this information forward is to get council's feedback. You can tell us this is a horrible idea and we don't want to do it. It costs too much, and that's the purpose of this, providing information. So
okay.
You tell us what you want to do.
All right, let me go back to my
Well, wait a minute. John, let Mark finish, and then we'll come in.
Thank you. So off of that onto the other portion, I will still have some reservation about doing the whole city at one time. So I would hope later that we can come back and talk about that as well, because I'm sure there's some scenarios there where it didn't go so right, and I want to make sure that we're comfortable with our citizens and comfortable with us as an organization when we roll out something such a large project. So I would like to see some more examples of being rolled out, and what happens when it did roll out all at one time, what happened when it did not. So I think later I would like to see or hear more information around that. And then the last point would be the maintenance average cost. I think I'm hearing 10 years that is going to be under warranty. Does that mean that the city will not be at any have any costs for 10 years as well as the citizens? Is that what I'm understanding on the meter?
Yeah, so the meter manufacturers do a 10-year full warranty, and then they prorate it for the following 10 years. So it's a 20-year warranty, and this is on the equipment. So if a meter fails, these aren't inexpensive. So if a meter fails, it would never be for the citizens, but it says, well, who's responsible? First 10 years, the manufacturer fully covers it. After that, it's kind of like your tires. If you got whatever 30,000 miles in your tires, they warranty it, but they're going to say, well, you've used some of the expected life. So they prorate it for those 10 years, which is why we decrease that savings, because now it's kind of a shared cost if there are some. Now, we don't expect to see a lot of failures, but to be conservative, we've modeled it to have a shared cost after year 10.
Okay, and I'm close with. I'm like the mayor who mentioned. I know we have to get the project done, so I'm not speaking against it. I want to make sure we have all of our other concerns out there as well that we can consider. I'm concluded with my comment. Thank you.
Mr. Cooks, if I may, real quick on the point about the rollout. I know we haven't really talked about timeline. When we say doing it all at once, this is still a fairly large project. So
Okay.
The timeline is still probably 12 to 18 months. So it's not like this is snap your fingers and it's done. One of the things that we have at Performance Services is an in-house marketing team. So a lot of before the project, before any meters go into the ground, a lot of it's around community engagement, education, awareness, and then there's a very tight project schedule. But I just want to make sure everyone understood that when we say doing it all at once, it's not like a month and this is done. There's still a process and a place. I want to say phasing, but it's a fairly long schedule. So just want to make sure you understood that it was still like a 12 to 18 month period.
All right, thank you for sharing that.
Hey, Johnette, you had some comments?
Yeah, I was just going to address what Mark was saying. He said he wanted to make sure for citizens that they understood that this accuracy was to, because if you're saying that we're losing $623,707, that that was their water bills that were going to go up. But you need to add on top of that, Mark, that they're going to pay on this bond issue, that we may have to go up on their water rates to pay for this system in order to bill them more. So they're going to pay for this spanking.
Well, the scenario that Richard painted for us did not incorporate any water rates until FY24.
It's still 2024.
Okay, I got to say something because my heart is bursting. This is cool. Crazy. It's kind of cool with crazy stuff. But based on Mark's question and Richard's response, I've had an epiphany. And the epiphany is that I've now understood how I can accept that 623 going down to down for 20 years, because that's the revenue that our customers are going to be paying for what they're not paying for today. And based on usage every single year for the next 20 years, that's going to be income coming in because of the accuracy of the meters. Now, I don't know if I'm explaining that well enough for anybody to accept or understand. I understand it, and now I can accept that 623 going down all the way through, because that's revenue coming in as a result of meter accuracy. I was stuck on life cycle costing because that's my background, and it's it's kind of hairy accounting because I'm not an accountant. But Mark asking that question and Richard giving that response, it's the hypothesis is now a whole lot more clear to me than it was before, and I just want to admit that and put that on the table. So I'm sorry if I caused Richard and Paul deep concern over the mayor being contrary about stuff. Just
Please.
So be it, I guess. Patrick, I see your hand up.
I was just thinking, perhaps looking at it from the perspective of, if year after year we don't do anything versus year after year we do this solution, then it's, to me, a comparison of not doing anything versus doing something. And every year that's going to happen.
And that's why I said it looked like more like a what if we don't than a what if we do kind of a spreadsheet. But now putting that perspective on it, I get it. I get it. Okay, Johnette, go ahead.
I'd like to see a list of the cities that are doing this and the rate of return that they've seen. The truth.
Is that some, Mr. Nicodemus, do you have that information, or is that something we have to get later?
So I can tell you that as far as cities that we've worked with, there's a number that have been installed for a few years, but if we go even beyond our projects that we've done,
I want something in writing. I want something in writing. I don't want off the top of your head.
I understand, and we can follow up. Yes,
we'll provide
follow up of specific cities and some of what we're seeing. But I guess I was just to say, even beyond us as performance services and the projects that we've done, we can point to a lot of very successful projects that are throughout the DFW area that have had similar, projections and business cases around it. And it's a proven technology. And I think for that reason, we can have confidence in guaranteeing the performance.
Okay, Tracy, I know I interrupted you. You had some slides toward the end. See if we can wrap this up. So I apologize for interrupting you. If we want to
Not at all. Not at all.
pull this together, I think.
And so I can actually speak to, I did call and check several of the references that PSI did provide to me. I actually do have a letter of recommendation from the city of Jacksonville for the project that they did for them. Called a few other cities as well. I can't remember who they are off the top of my head, but the feedback I got was it was overwhelmingly positive. So I'll just throw that out there for y'all. So where we're at right now, the project as it is, once PSI came back with their findings for the investment grade audit, it does have to be verified, reviewed and verified by a third-party engineer. Currently, it is with a company called Energy and Engineering Solutions. They are verifying all that information that you're basically looking at right now. So I expect to have a full report back from him probably this week that we'll be able to bring back to the council so y'all can see his comments in regards to that investment grade audit. And then the next one is basically the proposal, how we see rolling this out for the city. So as you can see, we've already done the preliminary audit. We did the letter of intent to do the investment grade audit, and we completed that audit. We've taken a look at the meters, and we've designated the option that we believe would be best for the city and the citizens. We are right now doing the third-party engineering review. So next on the list would be, project approval by council, that guidance from y'all on how we should proceed. Then we'll start looking at community engagement and awareness, making these folks aware of the technology that's coming their way, what that's going to provide to them. And then the construction piece, that's the 12 to 18 months. And then we would, of course, be integrating that into our new ERP system. And then the measurement and verification piece, that's basically PSI coming out and taking a look at everything that's been done and saying, hey, guess what, folks, this is exactly what we said it is. So that's the rollout proposal as it is right now. And that, I apologize. So, and there is the what if we do nothing slide here. So doing nothing, we will still see, we'll see that unrecoverable water loss. It's going to continue to increase for us because we're going to lose meter accuracy. AMI solutions down the road, it could get more expensive down the road. The citizens won't have the real-time data that would be available to them to make better decisions around their water consumption and making that conservation plan that we've already spoke about. We'll continue to see undetected water leaks for that 30 or more days. And then the manual read process, it introduces the whole human factor, errors and stuff like that, causing a need to roll a truck to go back out and reread. So those are the what ifs. We do nothing. And that concludes it for us.
Well, I want to thank you, Tracy, and the folks at PSI and Richard and staff for scrubbing these numbers down. It's extremely important to us in terms of our fiduciary responsibilities when it comes to the budgetary process, even though some of us may or may not be around in FY24. Our legacy is to do the right thing for as best as possible for the future of our city. And as I said, I think we understand why something like this needs to be done in terms of taking us into the proper technology for the proper and accurate capture of our business. Because as Richard once explained to me a couple of years ago when I was talking about water, he says, water is a business. We have to buy it, we have to sell it. And it's sometimes it's a little tough, but our external auditors have told us that we're in good shape in terms of not having to raise our water rates, which is a credit to our system and a credit to our capturing and doing everything as accurately as possible. So yeah, I see your hand up, Mr. McBurnett. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Really, my questions, I guess, towards Tracy and also towards Richard. But if consumers are getting real-time data, how are they getting the real-time data?
It would be through an app on their phone. They'll be able to download an app from the Google Store or the Apple Store. They could log in with their account information and they would be able to see that data coming in from the meters. How it works is the meters actually report to those repeaters, and then they report to the collection units. And those collection units then send that data up to a hosted platform where that all lives. So that's actually what the systems would be connecting to catch that real-time data. And it would also be available on a web portal.
Okay. And as a follow-up, I mean, if we have some older citizens, how are they going to be able to monitor their stuff if they don't have a smartphone or any access to a computer?
Well, I think that to a large degree that would be up to individual decisions. But that's something that we may have to look at down the road, Mr. McBurnett, in terms of, you know, we may be able to have reports that we don't have the capability now to alert people of situations where they might have a leak. But for those that do decide that, in addition to what Tracey explained, they would be able to set alerts within the app to notify them if they saw a certain percentage increase or a spike. And that I think is probably one of the key tools, is just being able to set those alerts that would get back to you. And whether we'll have the manpower to you know, do reports and call people or alert people, I don't know whether we'll have that manpower or not, but that's something we can look at.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have run over our time, and apologize for that. I think I probably caused some of it, but we need to move on. Mark, you stop that smile. I see that smile. So now, Mr. Hager, I have a question for you. Can we go into executive session without going into regular session? Or do I need to open regular session, then go into executive session?
If you can do it either way, Mayor. If you want to move it to the regular session and move it to the end so you can take care of your business, or move it to the front. If you have consent of the council, you can go ahead and move it.
I have a feeling that this may not take too long. Maybe we can take it now, dispense with it, and be able to move on to our meeting.
Yeah, it should not take very long at all, Mayor.
Okay,
it's more informational.
All right, let's conclude our work session at 7:13. It is February 2nd, 2021, and we are calling to order our regular session of the Duncanville City Council, and the time is 7:20. In accordance with an order of the Office of the Governor issued March 16th, 2020, is extended by the Governor June 12th, 2020, City Council for the City of Duncanville, Texas will conduct City Council regular meetings by video conference today, Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021, in order to advance public health goal of limiting face-to-face meetings in an effort to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic. This is an open meeting conducted by video conference. However, there is no public access to a physical location. Now, City Secretary, do we have any citizen comments?
No citizen comments, sir.
Okay, we will dispense with that portion then. The audience is in listen-only mode, so I don't believe that we're going to be having any citizens come in. However, if something happens, we will be notified by the City Secretary. As we go through, each council member, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand either visually on the screen so I or Kristen can pick it up, or use the raise your hand feature in the participant or chat function so we can see that you need to speak. And any votes that we have to take will be by roll call, as we have done in the past. Okay, Moving on to our agenda, the first thing we need to do is have an invocation. Mr. McBurnett, would you do the honor of the invocation for us, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Dear and gracious God, we want to thank you for the blessing that you've given us this day. May we follow your direction. May we open our hearts and minds and be open to what you can do and what we can be. Please continue to guide us, lead us, be with us. And we ask this in your son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
You're muted, Mayor.
Sorry. If you would each individually rise and give the pledges to our state flag and to our nation's flag, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, individually, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, and indivisible. All right, so moving on to item number 1 on the agenda, Mayor's report. I got a few things to cover. First of all, I want to thank Mr. McBurnett for filling in on our last city council meeting while I was feeling puny, as they say in Texas. Doing much better now. Thank you very much for doing that, Mr. McBurnett. And then follow on to that, personal congratulations again to Mr. Cooks for being selected as our Mayor Pro Tem. As someone said, as I was listening, it may be the shortest, or, Mr. McBurnett had the longest term as Mayor Pro Tem, and Mr. Cooks may have the shortest term as Mayor Pro Tem, depending on how the elections go. On a sad note, today, Tommy Wolverton was laid to rest. Mr. Wolverton was a patriarch of the Wolverton family in our city for multiple decades, and the patriarch of Wolverton Industries, Wolverton Heating and Air. So it was a very somber celebration of his homegoing. So if you would keep the Wolverton family and the business, all the people and the techs that were there, keep them in your thoughts and prayers for strength and comfort in this time of the passing of Mr. Wolverton. Real quick, tell you some things that have been involved in. On the 23rd of the month, my wife and I did participate with the Duncanville Independent School District on an outreach to re-engage students who had disengaged entirely from their academic practices. It was a very eye-opening time for us to go around the city and touch base and try and find these students that have totally disengaged because of the virtual pandemic. It was it's heartbreaking that some have said, I'm not going back to school. I've got a job. I'm making $700 a week. I don't need to graduate. But that's some of the issues that the DISD is dealing with. Also on the 22nd, I participated in the Inland Port Symposium. The Inland Port is located in DeSoto and running down 35. If you're not familiar with that, it will have significant economic impact on the southwestern Dallas County. Its impact on the city of Duncanville, we're not real sure of yet in terms of how that's going to be coming around. But I am in contact with the executive director, Laura Freeland, and she and I are going to be having a meeting probably next week sometime to discuss our participation in the Inland Port itself. Next thing, I did want to let you know that I also participated in the Duncanville ISD Police Department opening of their building on Main Street. And while it's really good for them, it's also good for the city because that building was an eyesore for many years, and it's been rehabbed and it's a nice place. And so we were able to participate in the grand opening of that building. Other thing that happened, the DRMC, Dallas Regional Mobility Coalition, I have been asked to participate in a subcommittee to revise the bylaws of the DRMC. You may recall that my seat on the DRMC represents the cities of Cedar Hill and Duncanville. So it's a quite important organization, And I feel honored that they asked me to be part of the bylaw revision on that one. On the 28th of the month last week, I was invited to a workshop with Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne. And while she is not of our district in the United States House of Representatives, she has just been appointed to the Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure, which directly impacts all of us. And so I was privileged to be a part of that workshop and to be able to hear some comments from the DFW Airport, from American Airlines, from Bell Helicopter, from Toyota. It was very, very significant to get that and to be able to interface with Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne. Let's see. I think that's that's all I have in terms of my mayor's report. Well, one last thing. I want to, you all are aware that our Economic Development Director, Jessica James, departed our employ at the end of December, which did what? That put a third hat on Mr. Fredrickson. So Mr. Fredrickson is now wearing 3 hats and taking a very, very tough job and trying to juggle all of that information. So Mr. Fredrickson, my personal thanks on behalf of our council for working with that, and looking forward to our new city manager coming on board the 22nd. And you can take 1 hat off anyway, and probably hang on to 2 for just a little while. Not even smiling, so okay. So I think I'm within my 3 minutes for doing my mayor's report. Are there any other council members' reports? Mr. McBurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. And just I want to add a little bit more about Tommy Wolverton as well, because Tommy really was again another one of the pillars that added to this community. He served as a director at First National Bank, which became Texas American Bank. He was also the chairman of Cedar Valley College Advisory Board for a number of years. He was Man of the Year. He was a good Lions Club member, but it was also a man that gave and had a lot of generosity, but he did it very humbly and very behind the scenes. So again, prayers for the family, and also somebody that's just a good mentor and that people should follow his example. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member reports? Mr. Cooks.
Yes, I have one, Mayor. I have a couple of Mayor here. First, I want to recognize and say happy birthday to Miss Naomi Cariel. She turned 100 years old on yesterday. She lives in Champions Cove. So happy belated birthday, should I say, to her. For those that don't know, Miss Cariel was on Channel 5 News and last week, and with her and her daughter, and she said all she wanted for her birthday was the COVID shot. So glad to say that she did get that shot for her birthday. So, but happy birthday to Miss Naomi Cariel that turned 100 years old. I know that we are doing the proclamation. I know that Councilman Harvey's doing the proclamation, but I want to do a recognition to a couple of people in our city for the Black History Month. I've been trying to do that at least every year, recognizing at least 2 people in our city that made some history in our city from a African-American standpoint. And one of the ones I wanted to recognize first is Sheriff Marion Brown. So let me read a very short resume on her. It's much longer than I'll read, but I'll read the short version of it. Sheriff Brown grew up in Dallas. She was educated in Dallas Public Schools. She's a graduate of University of Texas of Arlington, where she obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in communication. Sheriff Brown began her law enforcement career in 1988 with the Duncanville, Texas Police Department as a pioneer, being the first African-American female police officer. Sheriff Brown rose quickly within the ranks from the patrol officer. Her experience including serving as first line supervisor, formatting, supervising the community-oriented policing unit, crime prevention, community relations supervisor, patrol watch commander, criminal investigation commander, and assistant chief of police. Sheriff Brown also takes pride in using her experience to educate the community and promote partnership and foster genuine positive relationship between police and the community. She was first elected Dallas Sheriff in 2018 after being appointed by the interim sheriff by the Dallas County Commissioner's Court. She began her law enforcement career in 1988 with Duncanville Police Department, where she was the city's first African-American female officer. Her experience includes serving as I already read that. I just want to congratulate Sheriff Marion Brown for being an African-American hero for this African-American first Black History Month. So congratulations to Sheriff Brown. The second person I want to recognize is really talk about one of our parks. And I think I did this last year, but I'll repeat it with just a little add-on this year, and that is Pyburn Park. Pyburn Park was dedicated to the memory of Jean and Ole Ray Pyburn, devoted members of the Hollywood Park Recreation Association. Pioneers who led by examples by giving their time and finances in an unselfish manner to see these park properties are properly maintained. This contribution to Hollywood Park, the neighborhood spirit of pride, which would manifest itself into a general desire towards the care of Hollywood Park, and renamed Pyburn Park on July 19, 2005. Raised wisdom and advice, also helped indirectly aid the growth of Hollywood Park Homeowners Association. He saw good in all, and even if he did not totally agree, he would listen and try to find a middle ground. We are united in our appreciation towards Ray and Jean and their contribution to the neighborhood. With that, I'd like to recognize Bobby Roddy, who moved in Hollywood Park in 1988. He has lived in Hollywood Park for over 33 years, right across from the park, and was very instrumental in working with Mr. Pyburn in that neighborhood. So congratulations to both Sheriff Marion Brown and to Bobby Roddy, who lived in Hollywood Park for over 33 years. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Cooks. Any other council members' reports? Okay, seeing none, city manager's report, Mr. Frederickson. No.
No report.
Okay. Item number 2 on our agenda, proclamations and presentations. And this is a proclamation recognizing February 2021 as Black History Month. And Mr. Harvey, would you please read that proclamation?
Okay, I believe I just unmuted myself. Am I correct? Thank you. The following is a proclamation issued by the office of the mayor of the city of Duncanville, Texas, the city of champions. And it reads as follows. Whereas in 1976, Black History Month was formally adopted to honor and affirm the importance of Black history throughout our American experience. And whereas the history of people of African heritage goes back thousands of years and includes some of the greatest, most advanced, and innovative societies in the history of human existence. And whereas African Americans have played a significant role in American history, from the early days of the pioneers to our present day leaders in such industries as aerospace, finance, international trade, and government. And whereas Black History Month is a time for all Americans to reflect on the rich history and teaching of African Americans whose contributions are vast and wide. And whereas during Black History Month, all Americans are encouraged to reflect on the rich history and teachings of African Americans and to bear witness to the progress, beauty, and achievements they have made throughout our region. Now, therefore, Barry L. Gordon, Mayor of the city of Duncanville, Texas, do hereby proclaim February as Black History Month in the city of Duncanville, City of Champions, and urge all citizens to join him and us in celebrating the collective ingenuity, creativity, cultures, and traditions of African Americans and encourage everyone to participate in events honoring the contributions of Black Americans. Respectfully read, Patrick J. Harvey, Sr., Duncanville City Council Member at Large.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harvey, for that rendition of that proclamation. And I will add that our Public Information Officer, Alex Hamby, is going to be, well, he has a collection of materials that will be published and set about in our city, both on marquees and information on bulletin boards and throughout. So we are going to give a lot of recognition to Black History Month in the great city of Duncanville. So thank you very much for that. Moving on, we're going to dispense with item number 3, citizens input, since we have none. And moving on to item number 4, the consent agenda. City Secretary, would you please read the consent agenda?
Item 4A, consider the minutes for the January 11th joint meeting with Planning and Zoning Commission and the January 19th City Council regular meeting. 4B, consider a resolution appointing election judges for the city of Duncanville and Dallas County for the May 1st, 2021 general election and authorizing the city secretary to approve on behalf of the city of Duncanville any changes in the list of recommended election judges which may become necessary because of the inability to serve of any of the persons named in Exhibit A. 4C, consider a resolution authorizing the application to the North Central Texas Council of Governments and FY21 Homeland Security Grant State Homeland Security Program for the purchase of thermal imaging device that will be used for in support of the Police Department's Special Operations Unit with a total grant value of $5,000.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion to approve. Mr. McBurnett made a motion to approve. Is there a second? Mr. Cooks seconded. City Secretary, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Veracruz, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember McBurnett, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Anderson, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Pro-Tem Cooks, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Jameson, 4 are against. At-large Councilmember Harvey, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Gordon, 4 are against.
4. Thank you. The motion is carried. Moving on to item number 5, items for individual consideration. Consider an ordinance amending Chapter 13, Peddlers, Solicitors and Itinerant Vendors, Section 13-1, permit required by adding new subsection parens D by amending Section 13-1A, regulation of peddlers, solicitors, and itinerant vendors by amending subsections A and B by amending Section 13-7, permit to be carried / no solicitation, and amending Section 13-8 hours, providing a repealing clause, providing a severability clause, providing a savings clause, providing a penalty, a fine not to exceed the sum of $2,000, and providing for an effective date. Chief Brown, this is your item. Thank you.
Yes, sir, it is. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening again. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this item back before the council. If you recall, staff briefed council several weeks ago regarding amending our solicitation ordinance. And the reason we brought this before the council is we being the police department, we began seeing an increase in criminal activity, not only in the city of Duncanville, but across the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so we believe by making some amendments to our solicitation ordinance, we can reduce criminal and fraudulent conduct and activity. We can improve the safety of our residents. We can improve unwanted intrusion into our citizens' privacy. And we can also streamline solicitation permitting process in Duncanville. And so again, that is the reason why we are bringing this item back before you. We visited with our city attorney. Mr. Hager has made some changes that we discussed initially to this particular ordinance. And this evening, we are asking for council to approve so that we can place this ordinance into effect. Next slide, please. And again, these are the reasons for the proposed changes. If you look at bullet point number 1, reduce criminal and fraudulent conduct and activity. And essentially, this will help us identify unpermitted solicitors who have not had a criminal background check. Bullet point number 2, as we indicated during our initial briefing, we will now require our solicitors to wear a high visibility vest. Bullet point number 3, we have changed the times that solicitors can solicit in our community, as well as we put some holidays in the new ordinance as well. And then last but not least, we're going to streamline the solicitation permitting process, where all the records will be kept in our records division, and solicitors will be permitted once a year at the end of December. Next slide, please. The times currently, solicitors can solicit from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That has now been changed. The hours will be limited from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we've also placed the below listed holidays in our new ordinance. Next slide, please. This is a slide, Mayor and Council, that shows the high visibility vest that all solicitors will be required to wear. Next slide, please. And we will ask for an increase in our current fee. We would like to increase the fee to $25. And the primary reason, Mayor and Council, for that increase is the police department will be responsible for purchasing and issuing those high visibility vests. Next slide, please. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions that council may have.
Chief, I have one minor question. If a solicitor has a team of individuals to cover the city, does that fee apply to each individual, or does it apply to the aggregate team only?
It applies to each individual, Mayor, because each individual is required to complete an application. There's a background check on each individual, and a vest will be issued to each individual as well. We want to ensure that everyone that's soliciting in our community is someone that will not cause any issues, if you will, for our residents.
Okay. And how are we going, as a city, going to publicize this to potential vendors, peddlers, and solicitors?
That's a good question, Mayor. If the council approves this item tonight, we will work with Alex, and we will be sure that this information is disseminated to our citizens via social media platforms and the newsletters, et cetera.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions from, yes, Mr. Harvey?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I believe that hopefully I already know the answer to this question, but just for clarification's sake, I want to ask Chief, does anything in this change apply to aspiring local political candidates?
No, sir, not at all. Our ordinance has several exemptions, and political candidates are exempt from having to pay this fee.
Okay, I felt that, but I just wanted the record to show that my assumption was correct. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McBurnett.
Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve. Is there, oh, was that Councilmember Jameson? Did you second? Okay. Likely no further discussion. We do have the 3 pages of the ordinance in our package. So we'll move to a roll call vote. City Secretary, please.
Councilmember Veracruz, for or against? Councilmember McBurnett, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Anderson, for or against?
For.
Mayor Pro-Tem Cooks, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Jameson, for or against?
For.
At-large Councilmember Harvey, for or against?
For.
Mayor Gordon, for or against?
For. Thank you for unanimous approval of this motion. Chief, great initiative. And we know that our citizens are going to be very appreciative of taking this action on behalf of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 5B, consider amending ordinance number 2390, adopting the master fee schedule for fiscal year 2020-2021 by amending said master fee schedule to revise fees for subparts for planning, building inspections, sections subpart 7, 27, 60, and 70-72 is set forth on the attached exhibit A. Mr. Ramey will be taking this. Before you get started on this, Mr. Ramey, I want to say that reading through this, I was extremely educated. There's something going on that I wasn't even aware of, but I know you're going to go through that in terms of the fees that could be assessed and are going to be assessed based on your recommendations to us. So it was very educational for me to read through this package. So, Mr. Ramey, it's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council again. Tonight I'll be talking about an amendment to the current master fee schedule. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background. Back in May of 2019, House Bill 852 was signed into law, and that prohibited value-based building permit fees. So up until that point, basically the value of the project times a multiplier determined what the building permit fee was going to be in the city of Duncanville. So when the mayor or the governor signed House Bill 852 into law, the following month we amended our FY 2018-19 master fee schedule to reflect permit fees based on building size instead of project value. But there are a few items that are flat fees. At the time, we were basing it on historical information, and in Duncanville, we haven't really had any large buildings built in several years, and so we thought that our tiers would capture any building that would follow in Duncanville. In January, when we were calculating the permit fee for the new construction of the distribution center up on North Duncanville Road, which is a 354,000 square foot facility, we realized there was a breakdown in our fee schedule, resulting in a permit and plan review fee of $1.2 million, which is way outside the amount that we would need to cover the cost of that work. We are required by law to have rates that are commensurable with the actual cost to perform the work. So we can't use permit fees in this case to make extra money for the city. It's basically just to recoup our costs of our staff to do all the inspections and plan reviews associated with the building. At the time, we did take the opportunity to reevaluate the master fee for any other updates, which we will show you as well this evening. And then again, today, I'm here bringing you an amendment for your consideration to the master fee schedule. Next slide, please. So I'm I'm just running through, and when I did the staff report, I tried to tie all the changes to the master fee schedule that was presented. And again, this is just a summary of those changes. I'll orient you to the chart. The first column with the number, that's the row number on the master fee schedule that was provided in the packet, and it's available for anybody at the city. The item again is the item that we are changing, the current fee, the amended fee, and then there are just some remarks about those. So one of the new things that we added was filing a plat at the Dallas County. What we found is that we'll have certain replats that go through the process signed by the Planning and Zoning Commissioner, and then they just sit in the office. And as a result, the process of, the permitting that follows and any other ancillary work sort of sits while we're waiting on the property owner to come by, pick up their plats that are signed and get them over to county. And so what we're proposing is after 60 days, if the property owner has not come by and picked up their drawings and turned them into Dallas County, then we would do that for them for the cost plus a 10% courier fee. Those filing plats can be relatively expensive based on how many pages of the document. So we would just tie it to whatever we ended up paying at Dallas County on the day we dropped them off. Something else that we added on line 27 was an annual group home inspection. We are required for group homes that they get inspected and make sure that they're safe every year. And again, these aren't the boarding homes. These are the group homes that are licensed by the state and have done their done what they need to do to be in the city officially. But what we found is we do go out there with code, fire, building inspections to make sure that those are safe every year. And we're recommending that we get reimbursed for those inspection expenses. The next two that you see reflect an increase in the number of tiers for based on square foot of buildings. So we used to cap out at over 6,500 square feet, but we did not assign a maximum fee. And so what we're doing for new buildings now is breaking out the tiers all the way up to over 35,000, but applying a maximum fee of $50,000 for a commercial building permit. And then for line 59 right above it, well, we're not changing the rate that we calculated, which is 50% of the building permit, but we're adding a line to max that out at $25,000. And again, when the building official contacted Grand Prairie and Cedar Hill, these are the prices that they're charging for buildings of the same size in their cities. And so we thought that was a good, fair amount that accurately reflected the level of effort that city staff goes into these plans. Next slide, please. So in the next row, 82 to 85, again, it's the same thing, but this applies to remodels. So again, we added additional tiers all the way up to over 35,000, and then set a maximum fee again at 50,000. 154 was more administrative in nature. Previously, the vacant building late fee, registration late fee, was just included in the in line 153. But just to make it more visible and administratively easier to read, we're just separating that out. We didn't change the fee. It's just making it more evident. And then finally, what we're doing is reducing the rental registration, rental property certificate of occupancy, and from $10 down to $0. The fee to produce the rental registration property certificate of occupancy is included in their annual fee. Next slide, please. So our recommendation is that council approve the proposed amendments, subject to your questions. Next slide.
At the outset, I want to thank staff for taking the initiative and being proactive, recognizing that we did have an issue, not having to dealt with a building over 300,000 square feet before, that getting on top of it and asking some comparable values from our adjacent cities. It puts a good historical perspective on it for us, and something that's fair and reasonable as well. Any questions on part of council? If they're not, the chair will entertain. Yeah, Mr. Harvey.
Sorry about that. Not a question per se, but just a comment. In one sense, I'm really kind of torn about leaving money on the table. At the end of the day, though, we do have to be competitive and comparable to the other cities around us. So I'm in favor of the change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other comments. The chair will entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Cooks made a motion to approve, second by Ms. Jameson. Roll call vote. City Secretary, please.
Councilmember Veracruz, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember McBurnett, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Anderson, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Pro-Tem McBurnett, or Mayor Pro-Tem Cook, sorry, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember Jameson, 4 are against.
4.
Councilmember at Large Harvey, 4 are against.
4.
Mayor Gordon, 4 are against.
4. Thank you, council, for unanimous approval of that item. Moving on to item number C. Consider a resolution confirming the interim city manager's appointments of Tracey Martin as a member of the Duncanville Civil Service Commission, filling the vacancy of former Commissioner John Marks as of October 31st, 2020. Mr. Siegel, turning this over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. Next slide, please. This item is for the confirmation of a candidate for the Civil Service Commission. Our commission, as you may know, is a 3-member panel, and the members are appointed by the municipality's chief executive officer, in this case, Interim City Manager Frederickson, and appointments are confirmed by City Council. The commission responsibilities are established in the Texas Government Code, Chapter 143, which outlines all of the responsibilities for the commission. Primarily, the commission is an appeal board for police and fire employees who have some reason to appeal to a impartial third party for review, typically for disciplinary actions. But they also oversee all of the entry level and promotional testing opportunities for both police and fire classified service. Next slide, please. So per the chapter 143, specifically subsection 0.006, commission members serve staggered 3-year terms, and the existing vacancy is to fill former Chairman John Marks's position. He had served 2 3-year terms, which is the maximum that you are allowed to serve. His opening came in October, upon which time we advertised for candidates. We did receive 2 candidates, and we vetted these candidates very carefully. The vetting process was with Interim City Manager Frederickson, myself as the Civil Service Director, and both police and fire chiefs. Next slide, please. By unanimous decision, we do recommend applicant Tracey Martin to fulfill the term for this vacancy. Ms. Martin has been a Duncanville resident for 3 years. She has wonderful related experience in that she is a senior administrative assistant. She has lots of HR experience with the city of Fort Worth, and specifically, she is very familiar with civil service, chapter 143. She has written civil service testing questions. She's been a party to the appeals process with the civil service entry level and promotional examinations, which is very rare experience to have. And I think she would serve our commission very well. Next slide, please. That's all I have for you. Ms. Martin is on board. If you have any questions of either myself or Ms. Martin, we would gladly entertain those.
Miss Martin, there you are. How about saying hi to us?
Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing?
So based on what Mr. Siegel has told us about your background and experience with civil service, it honestly, looking at your application, all that experience didn't come through. So it's good to hear that your experience is replete with a number of things that you're able to do with the civil service, because it's a totally different type of personnel responsibility.
Yes,
So thank you for that, and thank you for being. You say you've only lived in Duncanville for a short time, but 3 years is not a short time. Thank you for being a resident. Any questions of Ms. Martin by any council member? Okay, seeing none, the chair will accept.
One.
Oh, okay, Ms. Jameson, go ahead, please.
Hey, Miss Martin.
Hello.
I'm Johnette Jameson. I'm just curious, which district do you live in?
I don't know.
Do you know?
I want to say, well, I live in Homestead off of Big Stone Gap. And I've looked it up
So that's
several
one.
times.
Oh, is that two?
Yes, I think it's two. Yes, I've looked it up several times, and I apologize. I have looked it up, but I want to say it's two.
Well, so you're Don.
It is
Don
two.
McBurnett is your council person.
Yes.
Wave to her, Don. So we just like to know our people.
Thank you very much.
We feel very close to our people.
Good. It's been kind of because I still work with the city of Fort Worth, so it's been kind of difficult. But during this time, I've spent a lot of time at home, so I've really got to know the area, which has been pretty fun.
So did you live in Fort Worth before?
No, ma'am. I moved originally here from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and
wow.
I got here in Texas 7 years ago. And so when it came time to buy a house, this just it was a great place, and we really like it here.
Okay, good. Well, we will, I'm sure, get to know you better as time progresses.
Okay.
But that's what I thought when I read your stuff. I thought, it's a piece of paper. Who is she? So I wanted to see you and know where you lived. And,
yes, ma'am.
and if I see you on the street, now I'll know you.
Good. Thank you.
Look forward to it.
Mr. McBurnett, I saw your hand up.
Well, Mayor, I'd like to welcome her, and I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion approved by Mr. McBurnett, a second by Ms. Jameson. City Secretary, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Veracruz, for or against?
For.
Councilmember McBurnett, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Anderson, for or against?
For.
Mayor Pro-Tem Cooks, for or against?
For.
Councilmember Jameson, for or against?
For.
At-large Councilmember Harvey, for or against?
For.
Mayor Gordon, for or against?
For. And unanimous approval. Martin, thank you very much for volunteering to do that for us. It's a very, very important position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go to work.
I hope not.
Exactly.
Okay.
No one has complaints here.
Yeah, let's hope not. Let's hope she has nothing to do.
Okay, moving on to item D, any necessary action as a result of executive session. There is no action to be taken as a result of executive session. Moving on to item number 6, staff and board reports. We have all been provided this information. However, because of where we are in terms of our the fiscal responsibility and so forth. I'd kind of like to just get a quick overview from Mr. Summerlin on the finances, the fund balances that you have on your cover sheet, if you would, please.
Okay, essentially, we ended the month of December with about 16.5 million fund balance in the general fund, with taking our reserve that we have previously had for the AMI project out of the fund balance for the utility fund. We had an ending balance of about 2.5 million. And then sanitation fund, about 754,000, economic development, 3.7 million. The Fieldhouse on a cash basis showing a loss of 1.3 million. And then our comprehensive self-insurance fund at about 681. And so that general fund amount equates to about 189 days of fund balance. Keep in mind that during the first few months of the year, we're building fund balance because we're receiving those property tax revenues in. So you'll see that continue to escalate through January, February, and then it'll start to taper off. And then 47 days of fund balance in the utility fund and 67 on the sanitation fund.
From what I read on the property taxes, if I recall correctly, you say they're pretty well on schedule from what you expect. Is that correct?
Yeah, I haven't looked at any specific metrics, but when you look at the collection, we're at the end of December for comparing that to budget. Overall, we're at about 50% already, and that's pretty typical for the end of December. A lot of folks try to get that their tax paid before the end of the calendar year, so that's on target.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions, Mr. Summerlin? All right, moving on. Item B is the Fieldhouse Quarterly Report. Mr. Brassfield, I saw that you're available somewhere. You still there? Yes, there you are. Mr. Brassfield.
Yes, sir. Am I there?
Yes, you're on. One thing I'd like to say before you get started is that we sometimes have received, how shall I put this, inputs from individuals that see a whole bunch of cars sitting outside our field house because something important is going on inside. And they make an assumption that our field house is not complying with masking and social distancing and sanitation and so forth. And they only find out that you and your staff are doing a superb job of it. It's very, very hard to control when you've got a couple hundred people in there, but everything that we've observed, everything reported, everything's being done right. So thank you to you and your staff for making sure that masking and sanitizing and social distancing is being complied with in the field house. I just wanted to preface your report with that and thank you for all that you're doing. I know it's not an easy job.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a team effort with our complete staff, obviously, that it's a lot going on.
Absolutely. So go ahead with your report, Mr. Brassfield.
Okay, we'll just start with the next slide. We'll get down to the graphs. Next slide. Okay, the first couple of graphs are the actuals against adopted budget that shows where we are. You can go to the next slide on expenses. Same thing, a graph against where we are. The next slide will show a summary that actually budgeted for a $68,000 loss after our revisions from COVID impacts. The 3-month period of the fourth quarter, which is FY21 first quarter, shows a $47,000 revenue against expensive plus, which is very good. I think that's the first time we've achieved that since I've been here. But we were originally budgeted to to make a $50,000 profit, but after revisions, we did cut that back. That'll all be fixed in our May budgeting process to get our budgets back in line. Hopefully, as we see COVID mitigating and being able to get back to a sense of normalcy. We are running at 50% capacity as the governor has put out as the state guidelines and the county guidelines. We're following those at 50%. I want to salute whose idea it was to purchase the Safe Pass machine, especially Safe Pass and some of the other items that resources that we were given to fight this battle, if you will, to keep the place safe and operating. We do use all three of them on a daily basis, some more than other ones on weekends versus weekdays. It's all a community effort to try to use what we can to make it safe. We learned of these protocols or received these protocols and resources in November and tried to get everything implemented by the first of the year when we really kick off our busiest season. Next slide, please. If you the next slides are just kind of a feature. I'm sure you guys know about these things, resources that we have, but I wanted to kind of summarize everything we have. We have 2 of the Safe Pass disinfectant stations, a couple of kinetic smart scans, 5 sanitizing sprayers. And the next slide will go over our in-house protocols that we implement on a daily basis. With focus on this slide, its focus is on the tournaments that we put on. So the first slide talks about the Safe Pass system and all of its amenities. The next slide, please, is the kinetic smart scan, primarily used during the week when it's a little bit slower with folks coming in. We rely on the Safe Pass more for the tournaments. Next slide, please. The sanitizing system sprayers is something that we use daily. Building attendants in the morning start the day with sweeping the whole building and spraying pretty much everything down. And then they're a part of the cleaning efforts between games at tournaments and our leagues. We use them as we empty the gyms and get started for the next round of games. We use them on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. This slide here talks about how we get to 50% capacity. We just basically took our inventory and cut everything in half and try to use these guidelines the best as possible. It's really hard to get people to separate and when you have a larger crowds, but the idea here is to set a template for what the building was at 100% and then cut it back to 50 in all aspects, both gyms as well as the cafe area. Next slide, please. This slide here is our protocols that if you'll notice, we only allow 35 tickets per game. If you add that up, that's 210 tickets per gym, 420 fans in any one game. And the idea is after every game, the gym is emptied and then we sanitize and allow the next group of fans to come in. To get a little bit ahead of the game, we allow this upstairs area, we've turned it into a staging area where players can go up and have their meetings and get their shoes tied and stretch and whatnot upstairs, and then they're called down when their court's ready. Has been working very well. And the key to this this effort, it's managed by us, but performed by the licensee, the tournament director. So our labor is kept at a minimum. We put that onus back on the licensee to make sure they have enough staff to clean behind themselves. Obviously, it's our responsibility to make sure it gets done, but trying to allow others to help in the effort as well as with the temp checks and sanitizing as we're discussing right now on in the slide there. We'll go to the next slide. Another challenge was getting everybody into the facility and out the facility. And basically what we've done is we've created one way in and one way out and separated that, meaning that fans come in the blue side, enjoy the game and go out the side door. Same thing on the green side, but that's primarily for players. Players will come in on that side and go upstairs. fans filter into the green gym, but go out the side gym doors to mitigate traffic back and forth where we see each other coming and going. Obviously, everybody's got to have a mask on. Everybody's got to go through Safe Pass. Very little trouble getting people to do this. We've had some challenges, some events more than other ones, but for the most part, everybody sees the value in it and is complying at a very high percentage rate. We try to keep the courtside restrooms up and running to keep people in the gyms. We do allow people to go out and get something to eat, but there's no loitering in the lobby area. You have to eat and get back to your seat at the gym. And obviously, we stopped any handshakes and such as that after games to get the players out. Next slide, please. There was one of those for fans, and there was one for players as well. So we'll go on to the next slide. And that is our January calendar. That's got what we did actually in the months of the quarter. And then you go to the next slide. Obviously, January's gone. Got a huge February coming up. Volleyball is a sport due to COVID. A lot of facilities around the area have closed, and we've taken on more volleyball, which is a good thing. And obviously, basketball tournaments and leagues are our top deal. And you see those there in February. And then the next slide will be March. And it's really more of the same. Karate is a big for us. We have a state tournament for the Athletic Christian Association coming up as well. Gasso in the month. So March should be a really good month for us. Next slide. I'll try to answer any questions if necessary.
Well, Mr. Rassfield, I want to give kudos to you and your staff, because it would be the easiest would be the path of least resistance would be to just shut down and not bother with anything, because it's just too difficult to deal with. But you haven't done that. You've implemented a strategic contingency plan that continues to bring in revenue, continues to bring people to our city, and to keep that activity open. So thanks to you for having that initiative and working hard to continue to bring people in. So it's kudos to all of you, and all those sanitizing things that you have to do and the controlling of it. Very thankfully, as far as what I'm understanding and hearing, that we have not had to have any police action to resolve any conflicts with individuals saying, no, I'm not going to wear a mask, I'm not going to do that. So I do know that our police force is available, but you haven't had to avail them of any incident yet. And that's a compliment to our fans and a compliment to all of our athletes that compete as well, that we are in a new age, a new time of having to do what's best to keep ourselves responsible and safe, and to keep others responsible and safe as well. So thanks. Any questions of Mr. Rassfield by any council members? Okay, thanks again, Mr. Rassfield. Appreciate it very, very much.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to item C, the Parks and Recreation Quarterly Report, Mr. Stevenson.
Yes, sir, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We've got you.
Okay. Let me go on the next slide. All right, park maintenance for the last quarter, we finished the installation of the outdoor fitness equipment at Pyburn Park. We received some really good comments back from the community about that, those improvements, along with the 2 cardio pieces. So it's been a great addition to our park system. We also created and installed a lighted Christmas display in Armstrong Park. This was in direct relation to having to cancel our Christmas parade. We wanted to find some other way to celebrate the Christmas season with our community, and our park guys deserve a lot of credit for coming up with a lot of the ideas and how we did that. And it received a tremendous amount of public support. We've talked to our park board at our January meeting, and we'll probably be looking to expand this idea in the future for more lighted park amenities for Armstrong Park as we move forward, and really make that something special that we can hang our hat on for years to come. Timothy and his group hosted the annual Arbor Day tree planting event at Armstrong Park and a tree giveaway. And also I want to share that Timothy successfully obtained his renewal of his CPSI, Certified Playground Safety Inspector certification. Now, I bring that up because that's a big deal. That's a really tough test. Timothy's done a couple of years, a couple of times now, but most people don't know we actually inspect all of our playgrounds on a monthly basis, and we take photographic evidence and we write down everything that we see and really do a good job of documenting how our playgrounds are maintained. And I'm proud to say that we do a fantastic job with that. Next slide. For Recreation Center, we've seen a tremendous amount of increase in activity. Again, I think a lot of that is due, as Mr. Brassfield noted, there's several facilities in our area that are still closed or limiting access to their gyms. We are also limiting access to our gyms, but we have a little bit higher capacity due to our size than some of our other local sister cities. And so we see a tremendous amount of day use for our basketball gyms. And we've also seen a really big uptick in the number of new members. We had 163 at the time of this, put the presentation together last week. That actually has gone up significantly to about another 100 people. So a lot of new folks are learning about the rec center and coming and using it. And so again, kudos to Noel and his group for that. The biggest new program we started this past year, past quarter, was our Friday Night Volleyball League. Again, something that's been very successful, something new to the Duncanville Recreation Center in my time there, and again, it's been well received. We've not had any special events, and we've also installed a gaming center, and we're having our first esports event coming up in a couple of weeks. So we're excited about that. Next slide. Our senior center remains closed due to COVID-19, and I would anticipate this facility will remain closed for a while. We have had some discussions with staff as well as our city attorney about the parameters by which we can perhaps open up in the future with the vaccine now being available. Once the vaccine is available to more of the common public, then we would hope that we can get that open just as soon as possible. I know the seniors miss the senior center, and we miss having them there as well. We are continuing our meal program, and we are serving, actually it says 11 meals per day. That should be 110. That's a typo. Apologize about that. We're averaging about 110 meals per day, and that includes a Saturday meal that is handed out on Fridays. So next slide. Again, our senior center is closed, but we are continuing our services as much as possible. We did have a decrease in the number of meals. As I mentioned, we used to have a Sunday meal service as well, but DAAA lost funding, or the funding from the federal government ran out. And so they've had to eliminate the Sunday meals about a month ago. So we are trying to do some events with the seniors. We've had a parking lot bingo events. We honked the win, and it's been pretty popular. Also had a drive-through health and wellness fair, and we did a flu shot program. Next slide. And let's talk a little bit about our bond election projects. Our Lakeside Pavilion, the pavilion is obviously complete. We're finishing up the parking lot. The parking lot itself is complete. We're now working on the landscaping and the irrigation. That should be done in the next few weeks. Armstrong Park, in our last report, we didn't talk about it publicly, but I am very proud to say that we received a $750,000 grant from Texas Parks and Wildlife. That will be finalized in March of this year. And then we can move forward with the bidding of the project and getting it under construction. We would anticipate that to begin this summer. Harrington Park, we're very close to finishing the plans on that as well. As you're aware, we met with you guys a couple of months ago to talk about the concession stands and restrooms. We finalized that. So that is now moving forward for finalization. We're also working with TRA because we do have to cross a TRA easement on the south side of 10 Mile Creek to connect it to Waterview Park. And those discussions are going very well. They've been very good to work with. And so we don't anticipate any issues with that moving forward. The service center renovation, the project is currently out to bid. And we expect those bids to come back later this month, with construction starting this spring. And then you've probably noticed we've had the shared use bike lanes going in, the markings have gone in for the on-street bike lanes that you guys talked about with the park board. And the signage will be going in the next few weeks. And then we'll have to have that all done by the next month or two. So next slide. I'll entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Bart. And one thing I wanted to add is that I do know that your staff or the Parks and Rec staff is doing a lot of work with Alex Hamby on Black History Month for putting up materials and procuring those materials and getting them out. So thanks to your staff for lending a big hand to Alex in that work. So let's see, I saw Mr. Harvey. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment to let Bart know and convey to his staff my personal appreciation to Timothy Hamilton for obtaining that certification to do that very necessary work that we now have the ability to do in-house and don't have to third party, as well as the Texas Park grant and the ongoing work with the bike lanes. Just want you to know that we certainly appreciate what you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, Barton, and your staff. That brings us to the close of our City Council meeting for February 2nd, 2021. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and attention, and we will call our meeting adjourned at 8:28. Thank you. Have a blessed evening.